Are you looking to transition from a corporate career and kickstart an entrepreneurial venture? Hear from a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar business who did it himself on this episode of Tomorrow's Tech. Formerly the CEO of CS Energy, Martin Moore joined forces with his daughter Emma to kickstart Your CEO Mentor, where he shares practical insights to drive high-performance leadership. Welcome on the show, Marty.
Thanks, Sam. Great to be here.
Corporate leading CEOs come from a structured business environment where they need to transition into an unstructured startup environment. What practical steps can you suggest for them to transition successfully into an entrepreneurial venture?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Sam, and I think the number one message I'd give is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's amazing the level of capability you develop as a corporate executive and how transferable that actually is.
Absolutely.
So the very first thing I'd say is it's the lean mentality that you've got to master. You don't have a legal team that you can just throw a problem at and ask them to solve. You've got to be much smarter about how you use resources in a lean way. Now, fortunately, with the gig economy, it's really easy these days. You can pick up high levels of expertise very cheaply and quickly out of the market, and you can use that flexibly as you need to as an entrepreneur. But another great example is capital investment. So in a big corporate environment, you take capital investment very, very seriously. And a capital investment for a large amount of money might actually include a 200-page business case. And it's exactly the same principle that you have in the entrepreneurial environment. You want to know how much you're going to invest, what the risks are, and what the return is at the end of it. But instead of a 200-page business case, you're doing it on the back of a beer coaster. It's the same principle.
What practical learnings are transferable from a successful corporate career to a startup environment?
Well, Sam, I think the first thing is financial management skills. And we underrate these because they're boring and they're not sexy, right? But financial management skills are just so important in an entrepreneurial environment. So there's this old saying, right? Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash flow is reality. So you've got to know how to manage cash flow so that the business survives through all the shocks that you're going to get as an entrepreneur in a much smaller scale of business. Another thing I'd say is that it's really important for you to understand how leadership applies in a smaller environment.
Sure.
Now, coming from a corporate CEO world, you might have 5, 6 layers of people in between you and where the work's getting done. You turn around to being an entrepreneur and you have no layers. And so you've got to be really aware of what's going on at the front, at the coalface, and then to make your decisions and adapt accordingly. And you've got to manage resources like you've got your sleeves rolled up without actually interfering and micromanaging, which is sometimes a little bit tricky. And I'd say the last thing is the understanding of how to operate in extreme ambiguity. If you're
Correct.
High up in a large organisation, the ambiguity is enormous and the complexity is really, really high. When you come back down into an entrepreneurial environment, it's the same deal, except that you have to manage it yourself. You don't have the data that you normally would have as inputs. Same deal though. So these things are absolutely transferable, once again, if you use a lean mindset.
That's great advice, Marty. And how is the leadership style and mindset different when you're in an entrepreneurial setting to that which is required in a corporate role?
I think there are a couple of things. One of the key elements of leadership is decision making, and speed of decision making is so important. Speed over accuracy every single day is the way you have to go. Now, most corporates tend to lose that speed of decision making, and so they're talking about doing things very, very slowly, looking for consensus, all those things that in a corporate environment you can let time slip by. When you let time slip by, you let advantage slip by. So in an entrepreneurial environment, you've got to be much more conscious of the speed of decisions. You don't have all the data around you, so emotionally it's even harder than it is in a corporate environment because you can't rely on other people's opinions and inputs and market intelligence and competitor intelligence and all the other things that you would rely on to make good decisions. So you've got to have a high level of confidence and you've got to be prepared to make some mistakes, so it's excellence over perfection every time.
In your experience, what are 3 obstacles corporate executives need to overcome to be successful as an entrepreneur?
Well, the first thing, Sam, is not having the big resources that you have in big business. You know, you have so much available resource to solve any problem you like. So working on the smell of an oily rag is something that takes mental and emotional adjustment as well as just the physical adjustment of how you need to work day to day. The second thing is I was quite surprised by the fact that I was freaked out when the money stopped dropping into my account. So as a CEO, this massive wad of cash just drops in every month and it comes from somewhere, I don't know where, but that's fantastic, right? Because you've got that security of having the money constantly coming in. So going back to starting with a zero revenue base is quite challenging emotionally and psychologically. And there were times when I wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and just go, what the hell have I done? Like, why have I done this?
Oh, no.
But of course, you know, the upside potentially in the long term is way greater than it would be in any CEO role in a major company, which is fantastic. And then the last thing is the loss of identity and status. Now, we don't think about this very often, but as chief executive of a major corporation, the invites turn up to the corporate boxes at the major sporting events, you're sitting in the VIP lounges in the airlines, all of that is wonderful, and then it disappears. So there's a certain loss of identity you've got to come to terms with.
Thank you, Marty, for that real perspective.
It's a pleasure, Sam.
And thank you to our audience for tuning in and understanding how you can smartly transition into an entrepreneurial venture. We appreciate you following our Tomorrow's Tech LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and don't forget to subscribe to our Tomorrow's Tech YouTube channel. But for now, thanks for joining, be the movement, and see you next time on Tomorrow's Tech.
Tomorrow's Tech, presented by 3 Digital.